Hey guys, I wanted to make a quick video interview for how to use the example code provided with the glow stick night flyer from Lofted Aero to control all of the RGB LEDs that are placed throughout the airplane. The sample code will allow you to create multiple schemes for the RGB LEDs using a visual tool in Microsoft Excel, and then export that into code that can be flashed onto the controller board that's on the airplane. In this case, it's an Arduino Nano. My setup here, of course, I've got the plane with that Arduino Nano fitted. It's wired according to the diagram that's in the build guide, and I've plugged it into a USB cable so that I can connect the Arduino to my computer. I've also got my transmitter standing by and a battery pack so that I can power up and test the LEDs after we flash the code. Let's get started. Now, of course, since we're using an Arduino, we do need the Arduino IDE to be installed on the computer. I won't go through that process, but if you don't have it installed, I will put a link in the description so that you can download that from the Arduino website. We also, of course, need the example code itself. This is packaged with the download of the airplane, but you can also get it from the GitHub repository that I've linked as well. And I'll go ahead and download that as a zip file now. And we'll just save it on the desktop here. I'll go ahead and extract that. And we'll navigate to the glow stick patterns example. You'll see in here we've got the glow stick patterns Arduino sketch. That's the main code that runs the whole program. We've got the patterns.h header file. That's where all the schemes for the LEDs are set by the template Excel file. And you'll notice that that Excel file is an XLSM, indicating that it has macros. And it's the macro that's creating that header file. Now Windows is a little bit picky about that, so in order to make sure that the macro runs properly, we'll right click on here, we'll navigate to Properties, and down here in Security we want to click Unblock. That'll allow the macro to run on your system. And then we'll go ahead and open that Excel file. Now you'll see in this template, it's got some instructions, and then some blank cells that represent the left and right wing and tail surfaces of the airplane. And it's also got multiple sheets for multiple different patterns. And if you scroll through those sheets, we'll see kind of the different default patterns that I've put together for just some example schemes on the aircraft. This one's kind of a retro stick model scheme, which is kind of cool. Got some green and red for kind of directional recognition at night. You can put some simple text on here, which is pretty cool. The density of the LEDs is just barely good enough to spell out some words and have those be legible in flight. Little pictures as well. Pretty low resolution, but can usually make it work. It's a neat effect for sure. But the way this works is that the number of patterns that you have in sheets down here, and you can add or remove sheets from here, is the number of schemes that's written to that header file. And that'll get divided up into a PWM range for whatever RC signal that you've connected to the Arduino. Meaning, if you've got a 3-position switch and you have 3 patterns, that'll be mapped quite nicely to toggle between those 3 positions on your switch. You don't need to have multiple. You can have just one and not have an RC switch at all. Or you can do what I've done here and have 6 patterns, and I've assigned a 6-position set of buttons on my radio to toggle through them. And just for the sake of the example, we'll go ahead and make a new pattern here. And I'm just filling the cells on the spreadsheet with colors. The RGB LEDs will do their best to replicate these colors, of course, but keep in mind that they can only produce light, they can't produce darkness. So if you have grays or darker colors or blacks in the cell fill, then that'll just be dimmer or totally off LEDs. Okay, so now that I've got my sample scheme generated here, I'll go ahead and click this button to run the macro. And that'll give us a notice that the color arrays for the 6 patterns, since I didn't touch the remaining 5, are written to that patterns.h header file. And if we navigate back, we can see that that header file was just updated right now at the time that I'm filming the video. Next, we'll go ahead and open the main program in the Arduino IDE. And this program also includes the header, so you can go in here and you can see how that works. It's using hex values for the color fill for each of the LEDs on the left and right wings and the left and right tails as well. And then it includes this count up here for how many different sheets in the spreadsheet were written into patterns, so that the main code base can break that up into those PWM ranges that'll correspond to how many different positions on your switch on your radio that you're using to toggle between. There's also a channel assignment for controlling the brightness. You don't have to use this either. You can use a fixed brightness, but if you've got that set up, plugged into your receiver, mapped to a channel, you can use a switch or a slider to control the brightness of the LEDs. I won't change anything from the defaults here, but of course it's open source code, and there's some comments and some documentation if you want to read through and figure out how it works. Now I'll go ahead and I'll plug the Arduino Nano on my glow stick into my computer with the USB cable. And then I will choose the port that appears in the drop-down. And I will again confirm that we are using an Arduino Nano in this case. One thing to mention here is that I did unplug the brightness and the scheme control channels from the RC receiver. And the reason I did that is because on the Arduino Nano, those 5-volt pins that I've used to power the Arduino from the receiver are shared with the USB port. And I didn't want the USB cable from my computer to try to power the receiver and the servos on the model. Once I flash the code, I'll go ahead and plug them back in. And we'll go ahead and do that flashing now. You'll see it compiles the sketch and then uploads. And it's done. And we can go ahead and unplug it. And I'll plug back in the scheme control channel and the brightness channel on my RC receiver. And that's about it for the flashing. So I'll go ahead and power up the transmitter and the model, and we can see the results.
Welcome to Ethos.
And there we go. There's the scheme that we've just programmed. Pretty cool. And I can also use those buttons that I mentioned on my transmitter to cycle between the rest of the schemes that were in that kind of default spreadsheet there. And lastly, I can use a slider that I've set up to control the brightness as well. So that's pretty much it for the example application for the glow stick. And like I said, it is open source. It's not really priced into the cost of the airplane download or anything like that. It's just there to be a basis for some of the cool things that you can do with this aircraft. And I'd really encourage coming up with new features as well. And if you do, please consider sharing those or submitting a pull request back to the repository. It'd be really cool to be able to offer more and more cool LED patterns for this aircraft. Otherwise, happy flying and thanks for watching.